Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Smoko podcast. My name is Alexis Armstrong, your host. Nice to meet you. The Smoko podcast is the place to celebrate and highlight women working within STEM and trade occupations. So please tune in, take a break, and join us. We are on Smoko. And today we are extremely lucky to be joined by the lovely Karolina Dubiel, who is the founder of Girls in Aerospace, which is a wonderful nonprofit that is focused on increasing the representation of women and young girls in STEM and aerospace and aviation. So I can't wait to talk to her about her experience within aerospace, her background in coding and computing, also her organization, the founding of it, what they're working on. It's just an incredible organization, and really a conversation about culture and about the gender gap in aerospace and the pilot gap and misconceptions and kind of bigger ideas within the aviation industry. So Karolina, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It is an honor to have you here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's
Awesome. I'm so excited to chat with you about all these things. I've watched some Smoke episodes in the past, and I really, really like the level of conversation that we have on here. I think it's super important.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, that's very, very kind of you to say. So thank you so much. And to start us off, before we really dive into the nitty gritty, which is what I love to do, but before we get there, if we could maybe start at the very, very beginning, could you speak to your discovery and decision to enter the world of aviation? How did that happen? What was that process? And then how did that decision change your life and kind of introduce you to aerospace and now your organization? Like, what was the first step of your entry into the field?
Of course. So, just starting off with a brief introduction about who I am now, I'm
Mhm.
Karolina. I'm 18. I'm currently in college for computer science. So, I'll be talking a little bit about how I got first into aerospace and then how that happened, where now I'm doing comp sci, even though
Yeah.
I'm still very involved in the aerospace field. But this all started out, I mean, when I was super young, I was super passionate about planes, anything that flew, rockets. My family traveled a lot because we're split between Poland and the US. So, my parents immigrated to the US right before I was born, so we would go back as often as we could to see family. So I'd spend a lot of time on planes, and I
Mm.
loved every minute of it. I loved the idea of flying, the idea of like the mechanics that went into it, even before I was old enough to understand. So when I was 15, right after my 15th birthday, I got the opportunity to go on an orientation flight, which is like a free flight that some organizations provide where you can discover the joy of flying. They give
Cool.
you a co pilot seat, the pilot takes off, and you get the controls for a little bit.
Oh,
And
wow.
I enjoyed that so much. I was like, this is absolutely insane. I got to fly a plane before I've ever driven a car. I was absolutely fascinated by it. And I talked to my friends back home in Poland who are also passionate about the same kind of stuff that I am, aviation, aerospace. And I was like, guys, I flew a plane. I got to
Ah.
fly a plane before I could even drive a car. And they just couldn't believe it. They were like, we don't have organizations widely available in Poland like that can do that for free. Of course, there are
Mhm.
some programs in the country as a whole, but it's just nowhere near as widely available as it is for me in the US. So from then on, I realized that I was in a very privileged standpoint to be able to pursue my passions at such a young age and at no financial cost to me.
Mhm.
So I decided that I could probably make a small difference in this, and that's where the idea for Girls in Aerospace was born. Soon it would be 2020, so that was the depths of the pandemic at that
Yeah.
point. So it mostly started out very online with like Q&A webinars with aerospace engineers or pilots, and gradually we've been transitioning into more personal one-on-one programs and sometimes even in-person meetings. But that was the inspiration for Girls in Aerospace and what eventually became a much bigger, more formal organization.
Oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. And thank you so much for like walking through the whole process of it. I love that this was a childhood fascination and like passion of planes and flying and kind of having that draw to this field like from a very, very early age. And that's really cool. Like that tagline, I think is going to stay with you your entire life to be like, I flew a plane before I ever learned how to drive. Like that is
Yeah.
so like that's
That's like my favorite
amazing.
fun fact.
Yeah, like it is such a good fun fact. And it's like, what a powerful thing to give to a young girl and what an amazing thing to experience. And I love that idea of being like, okay, well, how privileged am I that I was able to do this in the States and then to bring this back home to my other home in Poland and
Hmm.
maybe open up GIA to both countries and both nationalities. And I love that aspect of it. I have one kind of question. So you started this in 2020 with Girls in
Hmm.
Aerospace, and you have this draw for aviation and cybersecurity and kind of computing.
Hmm.
what was the next step? Were you then like, okay, well, I'm now in aerospace. I'm now in this world. I'm going to go to university for cybersecurity. How did that happen? What was the next step after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started out not knowing anything about cybersecurity, as most people, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think many 15-year-olds out there could give
No.
you a good definition of cybersecurity. But my dad is in software, so I always had like a drive towards computers, that kind of stuff. But at that point, I was just coding little like playground programs because my dad
Ah.
told me that I should, and I was like, okay, whatever. So I wouldn't say I was super passionate about computer science to start with. But when I was about 16, I joined something called the Civil Air Patrol, which is the
Mm,
U.S. Air Force Auxiliary. And through the Civil Air Patrol, I joined the Air Force Association Cyber Patriot Competition, which
okay.
is a lot of
Words.
words. Um, if you've ever heard of First Robotics, I think that's a little bit more well known. It's that kind of vibe where it's a technology competition, except it has nothing to do with robotics, it's cybersecurity.
Mm.
So you join in a little team and they give you cyber challenges. So they give you a bunch of images or virtual machines that have vulnerabilities, and you have like a time limit, and you and your team have to go through and crack all the vulnerabilities and like
Cool.
find them and discover them. So that was like a cyber competition, not super well known, but I highly recommend it to anyone
Mm,
watching who is interested in cybersecurity. It's like the most fun thing ever. It's just the right amount of competitive and
mm-hmm,
relaxed, and that was what made me discover like, wait, this is so much fun.
mm.
And of course, it's through the Air Force Association, so everything kind of had like an aerospace vibe to it because most of the people were doing it either through Civil Air Patrol squadrons or like their school junior ROTC. So everyone there was kind of interested in the same stuff I was. And so through that, I discovered like aerospace is not just building a rocket and it's not just propulsion and it's not just avionics. Like there's a whole software aspect to this, especially with cybersecurity, because the systems that control the navigation of a rocket need to be extremely
Oh,
secure. We cannot
yeah.
have anyone
Can't be
having
open on the
access to
internet.
that.
No.
Exactly. Because a rocket, I mean, an out of control rocket is basically just a giant missile. So
Hmm.
cybersecurity is beyond important in the aerospace field. Yeah, Cyber Patriot helped me discover aerospace and computer science, specifically cybersecurity, are super, super interconnected. The fact that they have these cyber development programs within Air Force associations really just drove that point home. So from there, I was like, okay, I love aerospace. I now love like coding computers, computer science. So
Yeah.
like, what better way to combine the two than cybersecurity?
Oh, that is such a cool answer. And I love that your dad's in software and pushed you towards it. Like I like that your kind of childhood, it was not only traveling and planes, but it was also little mini tasks in computing and robotics and tasks at
Definitely.
home. That's really cool.
And I think with having immigrant parents, I think anyone who has immigrant parents can tell you this. I think they really try to push their interests to you. Like that's almost like their love
Hmm.
language to communicate with you. Because my parents came to the US because of my dad's software career. So I feel like he was trying to give me a piece of that, a piece of like what he thought made his life more fortunate. So I really like, I view that as a connection I have with my dad now. I can call him and
Oh.
tell him, like, can I send you my new coding project? I just made this in class. And it's a really, really great way to connect with my parents when I'm far from home and just like carry on the legacy that I feel that my dad gave me.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Are they back in Poland right now? Or are they in the States with
They're in
you?
Seattle
They're
and
in
I go to
Seattle.
school in
Okay.
Georgia. So we're
Okay.
pretty far apart.
Oh,
We're all the
yes,
way
it
across the
is.
US.
Okay. I wasn't sure if he had gone back to Poland or okay, so he's in Seattle and you're in Georgia. But that's so
Hmm.
beautiful that you have that connection and that you're able to talk
Yeah.
about
And I
something.
was really fortunate to grow up in an area like Seattle where aviation is, I mean, Seattle is huge in aviation. We have Alaska Airlines, we have
Hmm.
the Museum of Flight, we have Boeing. So I think a bunch of different factors, like from my childhood, just made the perfect situation where I could find aerospace and computer science and just like find a passion between the two.
Oh my goodness. No, it was like kind of made to be. I feel like everything
A
was like
little bit.
really like connected to be like, this is what you're going to do. This is your life path. That's so beautiful to hear. And I couldn't agree more too with immigrant parents and connection and love language of interest. Like I'm two generations removed now, two generations Canadian, but my grandma immigrated from Poland as well. And it was also,
Wow.
yes, yeah. And and it was really about education and about passing
Hmm.
down interests. And my dad started as a nuclear chemist. And that was a big thing in our household was like backyard chemistry explosions
Hmm.
and experiments. And it was just something very specific. But it was him being like, this is what I'm interested in. So this is how I'm going to show you love, but also kind of show you the importance of education because that got us here.
Definitely.
Right. Like
Yeah,
that.
that resonates a lot with me for sure. And I love that. I think it's something that all like children or even grandchildren of immigrants relate to is that they always want to share like the passion that got them here and
Hmm.
the drive that it took to emigrate out of that place. So
Hmm.
yeah, I absolutely love having that connection with my dad.
No, that's really cool. And it's also cool too that you found this like perfect interconnection between science and aerospace and science and aviation, because I don't think that's necessarily off the hop when people think planes, that they think
Hmm.
cybersecurity, or they even think technology and data. Is there something in that intersection between science and aerospace that you're specifically in love with? This might not have to be like cybersecurity and computing, but is there like maybe a personal aspect that you think that they're both really challenging, or they're both new, or they're both changing? Is there something about that interconnection that's the most fulfilling part for you, or something that you love the most about that?
I think the most fulfilling part is, I mean, the reason why I founded Girls in Aerospace is because I don't see a lot of people who look like me or who act like me or who I see myself in pursuing that field. And there's something very, very challenging but very gratifying about feeling like you're a trailblazer in your own community. Even though, of
Mm,
course, there are plenty of female aerospace engineers and computer scientists in aerospace, it still isn't something that a lot of young girls see as a possibility.
hmm.
I never thought that I could become like an engineer or a computer scientist when I was younger. So deciding like in middle or high school, like, no, I want to do this. I want
Yeah.
to pave this path for myself because still there's definitely women who have never had a woman like that in their family or in their immediate circle. So I like that pursuing a field in which you're a gender minority or even a racial minority, it makes you like the hero of your little circle. You're
Hmm.
paving the path for someone
Oh.
else. You're setting the path for future generations. So I think that it's simultaneously very challenging, of course, to not see role models close to you in your life, but
Hmm.
I think it's also very rewarding.
No, I like that answer. And I like that answer of seeing yourself as an advocate. It's seeing yourself as something bigger than who you are, maybe of your own personal experience, to be like, oh, I'm a scientist, or I'm an engineer, or I'm a computer scientist going into this, to be like, no, I represent a bigger community and I represent a gender minority. But I also think you bring up a good point too, that you know that they exist. You're like, yeah, there's women in aerospace, they're out there, but they're this mythical thing that you can't actually really experience on your day to day because they're not within your circle, they're not within your community.
Exactly.
With GIA, we've mentioned it a couple of times. I was wondering if we could
Yes.
take this time to really define it and give a plug if people don't know your organization. Could you kind of, I think we've already kind of talked a little bit about why you founded it and how that became first established within COVID. But then if people are unaware, what is your mission? Like, what's your guys' goals? Kind of how are you guys organized? What is GIA? This is your time to please explain it to the world, because everyone should know about this wonderful organization.
For sure. Thank you so much for giving me this platform to do that. I love like trying to reach as many people as possible. So, Girls in Aerospace is a 501c3 nonprofit. It is founded in the US, but we operate globally.
Mm.
And the goal is to just introduce more girls to the realm of aerospace. So, I'm sure we'll talk about this later with how I think we can fix the gender gap in
Hmm.
aerospace. And it's also what I gave my TED talk about
Yeah.
because I think that leading the nonprofit and talking to so many women has given me a grasp of maybe how we could start picking at this problem. But I think that one of the big issues is what we talked about earlier with the just lack of representation that women in aerospace who are pursuing it get. And therefore, these young girls, they don't even see it as a possibility to pursue this
Hmm.
field. So by the time they get to high school and they realize they're interested in this, it's already, I mean, it's too late. They already see themselves as a gender minority. They already have that extra blockade set up. So my goal with Girls in Aerospace was to approach the problem with the mindset of like, we need to start earlier
Mm.
and we need to start giving support to girls who are interested in aerospace earlier. We shouldn't be waiting until college for them to join a group like Women in Aviation.
Yeah.
This should be something that's readily accessible to them from a young age. So, the way that we tackle that with Girls in Aerospace currently is we provide mentorship, free one on one mentorship to girls all around the world. We actually have our signups opening for our newest program on October 1st.
Okay.
So, if anyone is
Wonderful.
ages 14 to 22 interested in aerospace, we gather their information, what they're interested in, what they want to do, what like stage of life they're at currently, stage of education, and then we have a mentor database of current either students or women professionals in the aerospace field, and we match them one on one, and they complete a 5 week mentorship program together where that girl is able to get advice and guidance, and they can stay in contact for as long as they want after. So that's kind of our current mission. We also have some really, really cool in person projects coming up in the next 6 months that I cannot talk about yet, unfortunately, but
That's okay.
stay tuned by following Girls in Aerospace on Instagram and checking out girlsinaerospace.org. But yeah, our main mission, I'd say right now, is focused around that mentorship, giving the one on one support from an early age.
Mm.
hopefully if we show girls support at age 14 instead of waiting until they're 18, 19, they have that little spark of inspiration and hope right from the start that they can succeed in this.
Oh, no, it's such a beautiful program. And I love that you're tackling early entry into STEM and aerospace because I think like you're right. If you wait until if someone's 18, 19, 20, you're already kind of preaching to the choir a little bit. They've already made that decision and they've already gone past at least a couple barriers to entry into aviation and aerospace. But I think if you focus when they're maybe 14 or younger and they don't really know about this, they don't even know that this is a possibility, all of a sudden giving them that shining light to be like this exists and this is what this looks
Yeah,
like
definitely.
and you could join. I think it's a very beautiful, powerful thing.
And they get to know a woman in aerospace on a personal level. Like this is their one-on-one mentor, big sister kind of figure in their life. So from then it feels like they don't have to trailblaze their own path. Like they have someone who they know who set it for them, who's following a similar field to them, who can offer advice, who can help out. So I feel like that really gives them a lot of hope and possibility for feeling that they can succeed in this and they don't have to do this all by themselves and pave their own trail.
Yeah. Because you're right. Like, I think going back to what we talked about at the very beginning of being like that fulfilling part of intersection of science and aerospace is you're like, I love being a hero in my circle, but sometimes it's hard to be a hero. It's tiring
Sometimes
to
you
be
don't
a
want to
hero.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sometimes you just want to follow your passions and have it feel the same as like everyone else who's doing it.
Hmm.
I remember I started my TED Talk by asking the audience, like, who knows a female pilot? And like two or three people raised their hands. I said pilot or aerospace engineer even, so it was a little bit more broad than just pilot. And then I asked, who knows a female doctor or a
Hmm.
female lawyer, which are also considered like male dominated fields, and like half the audience raised their hand.
Hmm.
So I think we group aerospace into that group of like medical field, legal fields, all of that, where women are considered the marginalized gender group, but it's
Hmm.
just so much worse for aerospace than those other groups still. So that's why I think we need to focus our energy on that a little bit to at least equal it out to the other male dominated fields that are doing better than aerospace right now by a huge factor.
Totally. Or that have already had years of maybe advocacy and years of
Exactly.
groups kind of creating this early narrative of like you can too can be a lawyer, you too can be a doctor. One thing that stood out when I watched that moment of your TED Talk, what came to mind is I'm sure you know that meme of asking random men who are not within aerospace if they think that they could fly a plane and
I've
having
seen
yeah,
that.
and like that came to mind of that confidence so that most guys if you ask them to be like hey do you think that you could fly this plane they'd be like oh yeah for sure but
Definitely.
then to be like the same confidence maybe to be like do you think like women could be pilots and be like oh no I don't really know if this is for them and you're like that just the level of confidence and the level of gender segregation of like what's allowed to them or available to women within aerospace. I that just came to mind that I was like, that would be really
Definitely.
interesting to hear those answers, and I bet you it would be a
Hmm.
very big gap in confidence or this idea of perceived ability. Like that might be
Yeah.
a kind of a weird, shocking thing. So I think that this is really wonderful that we can maybe do our ground steps to get there and to have more equality
Hmm.
in aerospace. For your mentors, how is that working? Are people contacting you or are you contacting people that were maybe mentees in the past in Girls in Aerospace? Has it kind of ballooned into something bigger than you imagined with people talking to you?
Definitely.
Yeah.
So this we kind of all like played it by ear because
Mm.
obviously I've never led a mentorship program. I started doing this when I was 16 years old and I was helping girls at that point up to 24 years old.
Oh, wow.
So I was completely going into this blind, kind of relying on community support and community guidance. But thankfully it's been very, very volunteer based, which I think is beautiful that we're able
Mm.
to have such a successful large program led entirely by women who are just volunteering their time to help others. And that's my favorite thing about the aerospace community is that each woman is so willing to like help other
Oh.
women up behind her. But we send out a sign up form where mentors can fill out their information and sign up. And it's pretty much 50-50. Sometimes I see someone really cool on LinkedIn and I reach out to them. I say, hey, would you be interested in being a mentor? I
Yeah.
love your experience. It would be super helpful. And sometimes they tell their colleagues, and we get a bunch of people from the same company as mentors, which is awesome. And then sometimes they just find us on social media and sign up like that. So
Oh.
it's very much word of mouth, volunteer based, but luckily people have been so supportive of it. And we've gotten so many great mentee testimonials that now when those mentees graduate from college and they get a job, then they sign up as mentors and so on. So we're on our third edition now. So we've run the program for about a year and a half. So we've gotten some mentees that have graduated or started college and have been helping out high school girls get into college or
Ah.
college girls get a job and so on.
Oh, that's amazing. I love to see that kind of like full circle nature of mentee mentor and people also contacting you within the community because I think it's probably been something that they wish that they had maybe when they were first
Definitely.
being trailblazers. What is the next goal kind of your fourth time of being your mentorship program? Is there something that you guys are working on that's a little bit new or is there something that you're really proud of that's coming down the pipeline in terms of mentorship program?
Yeah, so with this edition, we tried to focus on making it more than just one-on-one mentorship.
Hmm.
So while that is like a star feature of the program is that you get paired one-on-one, this isn't just like a group support system. I decided that community is so important and you
Hmm.
can't really get community if you're one-on-one. So we're trying to include more events that have the whole cohort as a group interacting,
Oh,
getting to know
cool.
each other, connecting. And each of our weeks have themes that we focus on for their professional development. And our week 2 theme is networking and cold emailing. And as part of that, everyone joins each other's LinkedIn networks. They practice like reaching out to each other, they practice introducing themselves to each other. So I think it's really awesome that this edition we're focusing on not just mentor mentee pairs, but also the general sense of community that we can foster as part of GIA.
Oh, I love that. I love that it's also called GIA. I've been calling it GIA, so I love
Oh,
that. It,
interchangeable. You're good.
okay, okay. Um, but I love that aspect of the step back, right? Because you're right. Like one-on-one mentorship is so important for on an individual level, but it's nice to be like, okay, yeah, it's not a vacuum. There's not just
Hmm.
two people in it. There's probably like thousands of people here. So that's really, really nice to see. Thank you for explaining the GIA mentorship program. I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. I mean, I think you've signed up over 200 students. Like
Yes,
it's,
over 200 girls matched.
oh my
And
goodness.
hopefully we're going to reach 500 by the end of the year. Very excited.
Oh,
I mean, yeah,
100%.
because each of those girls can then go tell her friends that she did this. She can share the advice with her friends. So I try to remind myself that we've mentored 200 girls, but those 200 girls are going to help so many more people. So we really rely on
Mm.
ripple effect.
Oh, totally. It is a ripple effect and it's just going to get bigger and bigger. And it's a community that's also going to be circular, that's going to come back to itself. So those are 200 probably future mentors, even if they're just mentees at the
Definitely.
moment. Carolina, I wanted to talk about one thing, and I'm really actually really interested in this conversation is because there's two branches of GIA. There's GIA Poland representing
Hmm.
like your two homes, GIA Poland and then GIA North America and America.
Yes.
And I was wondering if we could speak to the differences in operating internationally and the major differences in STEMinism between the two countries, because I think that this is a kind of a really cool term of STEMinism or feminism within STEM and if there are any major differences in operating between Poland and North America.
For sure. So I founded Girls in Aerospace as something to operate within the US when I first started, even though it was inspired by Poland.
Hmm.
But it was COVID. I was so far from Poland. I was like,
Oh,
this is going to be so hard.
you're
But
15.
eventually, yeah,
Yeah.
naturally, it branched out to Poland
Yeah.
because that was what started it. That was one of the main reasons why I thought that GM might be necessary.
Hmm.
And I'd say the biggest difference is the lack of confidence that we see within girls from Central and Eastern Europe.
Mm.
And I've talked to a bunch of other teen led nonprofits who operate in that area. And girls in Poland and Central and Eastern Europe in general kind of lack the sense of hope that I feel like a lot of girls in the US have, where they've seen so many women go through this. They feel hopeful as
Hmm.
to succeeding in this, even though they know it'll be hard as a gender minority, but they have like an intrinsic drive and sense of hope. Whereas girls in Central and Eastern Europe, I feel they're not as naturally willing to speak up for themselves. They're not as naturally willing to stand up against the men who like discriminate against them in the
Hmm.
field. And that's not to say that they're less determined or anything like
No,
that, but just the
no, no, no.
culture makes it harder to be a female trailblazer, to be someone who does something new or does something that people aren't used to seeing on a day-to-day basis. So I've paired up with a few other like teen-led organizations in Poland, and they all are focused not only on fostering the professional development of girls in that area, but also just the social like sense of confidence that you can
Hmm.
have, where you can stand up for yourself, say like, no, I belong at this table. I have to have a seat in this conversation. I've worked hard for this. I deserve this. That's just something that I think that girls in America are fortunate to kind of be told already at a young age, like with the generation that I grew up in.
Hmm.
But I feel that girls in Central and Eastern Europe don't quite have that level of support from a young age. So it definitely helps to work more on like the confidence and the sense of you deserve this, you
Hmm.
belong here, you've worked hard for this. It helps to include that in our programs more when we're working in Poland than in the US, where it's like we already kind of feel
Have that.
confident to have that initiative.
Yeah, have that within culture. It's interesting that that's the difference, but it's understandable to an extent. Also, maybe having Polish relatives or having Polish fruits, I feel like I could totally see that of a difference in culture and a different in gender expectation and gender roles and very stringent gender roles. Even though I feel like Central and Eastern Europe have been trailblazers in physical sciences and in sciences
Definitely.
and computing. So it's odd that you have this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially because I think that the girls in Poland, from what I've seen, are actually maybe even harder workers at
Hmm.
accomplishing this. Like, they are incredibly driven young women. They know that they have to work very, very hard to get to where they want to be, but they just lack that sense of like belonging in that
Hmm.
community. And they lack that sense of, especially in an English focused world, which the tech world does seem to be, they just lack that sense of confidence where they know they can succeed. They know they can work hard, but
Uh-huh.
they don't know that it'll pay off in the end. And I think that Polish culture also does tend to be a little bit pessimistic,
Yes, it
which a
does.
lot of Polish people will agree with.
Yeah.
Polish people love to complain,
Hmm.
they love to be pessimistic about things. And I think I've been published in some Polish media. I was
Mm.
published in a Polish Facebook campaign 2 years ago, which got a lot
Uh-huh.
of attention. And I got a lot of comments on it with older men on Facebook critiquing the fact that I was doing this and saying either this is never going to accomplish anything. Nothing's ever going to change. Why do women want to be involved in this so badly? Maybe women just don't care about aerospace. Maybe that's why they're not getting
Hmm.
involved. Either that or just saying that my parents are doing all of this for me because teen led organizations aren't as popular in Poland because I think it's partially because college apps don't look as much at extracurriculars in Poland.
Yeah.
So there isn't really that drive to like have an initiative as a teenager. So there's just a bunch of different factors that have teen girls maybe
Not as
not have as
confident.
much initiative and confidence to
Yeah.
pursue things like that. Because I'd say that the backlash that I've faced in Poland has been a little bit disheartening, which
Oh.
in the US, I wouldn't say I've gotten any hate for what I'm doing at all. It's very normal to have a project as a teenager. But again, being a teen girl in Poland in like a pessimistic culture and environment is not easy.
No.
So I'd say confidence is a big thing that they need help with.
Yeah, I could imagine that completely, and I agree with you. I feel like that unfortunately is kind of part of culture, part of Polish culture. I think it's food and pessimism. I think those are the
Well, it's interesting because I think
two.
that the like stubborn determination is also very much a part of it. I mean, Polish
Yeah.
people have been through so many things as a culture, and I think that they're so determined and they're so driven, but they're so pessimistic. Especially the older generation of men, I found just they love to hate on things that are different.
Hmm.
And when you like publish and you go to the Polish media, there's always some grumpy old man in your comments saying like, "Why are you doing this? Get back to school, do your homework, don't worry about this, leave this to the adults." And it's just a little discouraging. So
Yeah.
I'm glad I have the Polish sense of stubbornness to keep
To
going
keep
with this.
going. What I was also going to say is like the Polish sense of pride, like give you a couple years and then those grumpy old men are going to be your biggest champions to be like, I told her that it was going to work. And like, you know what I mean? Like she represents all of
Definitely.
Poland and like it's going to have that pride is going to be wrapped up. And I think it's really interesting that you brought up work ethic because I do agree that I feel like Eastern and Central European scientists that I've had the ability to work with at IODP, they are some of the most hardworking, but also technically skilled scientists that I have
For
ever
sure.
met because their education system is just a little bit different than a Canadian system or a North American system. That I feel like it's far more technical based at a younger age. And so it's interesting that maybe that confidence is lacking because the technical ability is not and the education is not. I mean, they're experts in it. And maybe this will bring us to the kind of second one is between the two branches of GIA America and then GIA Poland, what are things that you think that we can steal from each other in terms of STEMinism? Like, what do you think that GIA Poland and people within Poland and Central Europe, if they're listening, what do you think that they can steal from STEMinism in North America and then vice versa?
Yeah, I definitely say that in America, the sense of community is not as strong as the one in Poland because
Hmm.
the women in Poland who do make it in aerospace, they all know each other. They're all connected somehow. It's always a friend of a friend of a friend. And they really, really go out of their way to help these women. They don't just wait until they're asked.
Hmm.
They'll write emails, they're all for mentorship without even receiving anything in return for it. So I'd say that Poland does a great job of being very, very close knit. And the women who do make it in the aerospace field and in STEM fields in general are so incredibly supportive to a degree that you just don't see as much in the US. I think that comes with that sense of pride too, where
Mm,
they want to pass this on, they want to help other women up. But I'd say in the US, I love how normalized it is to just, or in North America in general, I say US because that's where I grew up,
yeah, no,
but
completely.
do something like start your own podcast
Mm,
or start your own foundation and do all of this as a young woman or as a student in high school even. I love how normal that is. And I do
mm,
think that college applications play a role in this because a lot of people do it because of college applications. Obviously, I'm already in college, so was not for college apps. I did that before I was thinking about that. But I love that in the US, that's just a thing that some teenagers do. They'll
mhm.
just start an organization that they care about. And that I think does wonders for closing gender gaps, does wonders for creating social change because teenagers are the future CEOs, they're the
Yeah,
future leaders of everything, of policy. So if they start with a cause that they're passionate about and they're able to nurture that from the time they're in high school, they're going to make so much change by the time they're an adult and they're working in business and all of that. So I love that the US encourages
has
that
that.
early on, but I love that Poland has such a strong sense of community
Mm.
when the women are a little bit older.
No, I like those answers too, and I feel like if you could do a combination of both of them, I think that's like the winning
The
recipe.
ultimate,
The
yeah.
ultimate goal, like that is the ultimate transformer to be able to change culture and change the gender gap and the pilot gap within aerospace. If you could take an action plan, what do you think that we should do as North Americans to become more tight knit, and then maybe to have that risk aversion of an American or North American of being like, yeah, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to start something and take a risk
Hmm.
and go individual. What do you think someone could maybe do to start those steps in the right direction? Maybe it's too big
Yeah,
of a broad of a
so
question, but
I'll twist the question a little
yeah.
bit into something that people ask me a lot, which is like, what can I do individually to help this cause? And I like to answer that in a way that goes beyond the foundation because, like, of
Mm,
course you could donate and support our programs, but I feel like that's such a closed answer that doesn't really
mhm,
tackle the root of the problem. And I'd say that the biggest thing that any individual can do is recognize that this can change because I think that too often the answer that we hear from men specifically is, oh, it's always going to be this way though. Like there's
mm,
always going to be a gender gap. There's always going to be more men feeling confident to succeed in the field. Women are always going to be at a disadvantage with this. Like of course it's sad that it is this way, but it's always going to be this way. And I hear that a lot and it's just kind of insensitive and disheartening to hear that they're so comfortable with
finite.
the status quo even though
Yeah.
they know that it's wrong and they know that it's unideal. They're just saying, "Oh, well, unfortunately, we're always going to have to put up with it." So I'd say the number one thing that anyone can do is believe that this can change
Mm,
and believe that this is not something that they have to comfortably accept. I think, unfortunately, in this situation, acceptance is compliance with it. Accepting that women will always be discriminated against in STEM is saying that you're okay with it, even if you
mhm.
see it as wrong. So, yeah, the number one thing I'd say in anywhere in the world internationally is to believe that we are going to change this and we can put an end to this. And discrimination against women in STEM should not be something that we're comfortable with or just saying like it's always going to be that way.
What a beautiful answer. And I love that kind of change in mindset. And also no decision is still a decision, right? Like of
Definitely.
not doing anything is saying that you're compliant with the status quo and compliant to what our stats are right now. And yeah, to have that
Yeah,
mindset
I
to
think
be
it's
like, it is
also a
going to
little
change.
bit of a closed mindset that's a little bit ignorant of history because, of course, people were saying even 100 years ago, like, women can't work in tech. Like,
Uh-huh.
it's never been that way. We're never going to be able to change that. Like, I'm sorry. It's like discriminatory, but it's never going to change. And now we've changed it. We're halfway there. Women
Hmm.
can work in tech, they can go into the field. Now we just get to make sure they're treated the same as their male coworkers
Hmm.
and have the same opportunities and the same encouragement. So, we can change it. We just have to, as a society, accept that this is a change that we can make if we all work together.
Yeah, completely. And it's a change, I think, to a good call out to be like, it's not this crazy change that's not possible. It's already been possible. We've already changed it multiple
Exactly.
times. This is just the next generation of that change. One thing that we've kind of mentioned a couple of times during our conversation so far is this idea of the pilot gap and this idea of the gender gap in aerospace. And it's been mentioned that you did this wonderful TED Talk, which I'm really excited about. And I loved watching it. I thought it was fantastic. I'm going to link it within this episode so
Thank
other
you so much.
people. No, it was incredible. Honestly, it was so good. I'm going to link it in this episode. If we could maybe speak to this, if we could speak to this gap and What do you think is the consequence of this gap? Maybe we've already talked about that a little bit. What do you think needs to be changed to jump this gap? That could be this mindset change that we just spoke of.
Hmm.
And then I know that this is a little bit of a different question or a two-part question, but sometimes I think in geology and geoscience, I think the idea why there's a gap is because it's based on misconceptions. So could you speak to any misconceptions that are associated to women within aerospace?
Definitely. So I'll start with kind of the first part, which I think summarizes everything we've talked about so
Mm,
far, where I think the gender gap in aerospace is very much a vicious cycle
mm,
because if we aren't seeing women in aerospace, then women aren't being inspired to go into aerospace and the loop continues.
mhm,
So I'd say that what we need to do to fix that is again that two-prong approach where first of all we start early when they're children, when they're young, when they're in elementary school, we speak of aerospace role models, we popularize women who are in tech and in aerospace, and then we provide early mentorship as well. And then the second prong of that approach would be just the general belief that this can
mhm,
change. And I would say that misconceptions within aerospace is not something I'm super familiar with because I'm not in the aerospace field. Of course, you hear a lot of things like you can't have a family life if you're in
mhm.
aerospace, or the studies are so hard that like college is going to be ridiculously difficult and not fun if you go into an aerospace or a STEM field. So there's just things like that, but that goes around, I think, about every single STEM field that you'd want to study.
Yeah.
I'd say that one of the problems that does keep women from aerospace, and this is something that's been worked on by many space influencers, many social media influencers are calling companies out for this, but many space companies don't offer paid maternity leave in the
Mm,
US, or they offer very minimal amounts, less than a month, 2 weeks paid maternity leave off, which makes it an environment that is not accepting to women, especially women who want to have families. They shouldn't have to choose between their families and their careers. Hopefully, as we push that forward and space companies become more accepting to women who want to balance family life and personal life and work as well, maybe we'll see more women going into that field and not having that stereotype of you can't have both, you can't have a family and a career.
yeah. No, I couldn't agree more because I feel like that's why the leaky pipeline exists. Like that's a whole phenomena that only really affects women within STEM and trades. And it's again that question to be like, you can't have both. You have to have one or the other, or you have to drop out of your
Exactly.
field. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
And I think that's very discouraging to women who are attracted to the idea of being a mother and raising a child. They think, if I want this so bad, then aerospace must not be for me, or computer science must not be for me, because these companies won't offer me the opportunity to do that. And eventually down the road, I'm going to have to sacrifice one or the other. So I think that being a mother is a beautiful thing, and
Hmm.
being within STEM is a beautiful thing, and we should not have to pick between those two as women.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. And I think that too, it sets a boundary way too young. It sets a decision when you're like
Exactly.
17 and you're like, I don't know. I don't know if I
Yeah,
want
exactly.
either. Right. Like men don't have to make that decision. They're
Exactly. Men can be fathers and engineers, and that's never something that they have to choose between. But for women, that becomes an issue. When I'm 17, 18,
Mhm,
thinking like, is this company that I'm applying for as an internship gonna offer me maternity leave if I take a full-time offer with them later? And
mhm,
it's just something that we should not have to worry about. That should be a basic right.
mhm. I agree. I really do. And I think it shouldn't even be on the table as something that you're thinking about at that age. I think it should be something that you think about maybe when you're closer to having a family, but it shouldn't be like, oh, in 10 years' time, am I going to have to reinvent myself or start a new career because I've wanted a family and because I can't
Exactly.
be in the field. Thank you for answering that and thank you for kind of doing steps too with the gender gap and like what can we actually put into play and how can I make an impact. I think that's really powerful other than just speaking to a concept of being like this is steps that you can get there and you can make a change. One thing I wanted to ask about, is there something right now that's really exciting you about this industry, about this field? Is there something that you're really nerding out about? This could be in cybersecurity and aerospace and aviation.
Oh my gosh, so many things. There's so much cool stuff going on with space right now. I'd say just the rise of commercial spaceflight, of privatized spaceflight, I think
Hmm.
is really cool. The fact that companies like SpaceX are succeeding so much. My SpaceX poster in the
I
back
know.
is a
I
paid actor right now.
was.
I just think it's so cool that space travel in general and launches are no longer limited to the government and they're no longer something inaccessible. So, like right now, almost every university has a CubeSat team where students literally build a satellite and they launch it.
What?
Um,
I didn't
yeah,
know
the
that.
little
That's
the little
cool.
shoebox satellites. Sometimes even they're smaller than that. Almost every college has a rocketry team which launches
What?
rockets. So I love that this is becoming a widespread thing, and I think companies like SpaceX really did help that because they showed that spaceflight doesn't have to be a governmental thing. I also
Hmm.
think it's so cool that now we're kind of getting into the era that you can pay to go into space and you
Hmm.
can visit space. That is awesome. I love that that's no longer just an astronaut thing and there's civilian astronauts. Of course, the caveat to that is I love that there's companies who are thinking about environment on Earth and space travel, and that we don't have to compromise the health of the Earth just to go into space, because space travel is a huge polluter
Yep.
and it is costly to our Earth materials to make these things. So I love that that is a conversation that's happening too. I'd say the rise of widespread spaceflight, but also the conversation of how do we do this while staying sustainable. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of great companies like Stoke Space, which is based in Washington. Quick plug for Stoke Space.
Okay, love it.
They are working on a lot of similar things to SpaceX, but everything is focused on like how do we use this technology to better life on Earth, which I
Mm.
think is a great mission because it's good to look at the stars and think of living among them one day, but we're going to be stuck down here for a while.
Yes, we
So I
are.
love of using that technology to make our life better.
No, I love that answer. And I love that pull back to the earth and to the environment right now, and to be able to develop a space program in an ethical way and in an environmentally sound way. Because I think sometimes you do get this idea to be like, okay, well, space travel and commercially available space travel is a gateway to like an exit for the elite to be like, okay, bye bye, see you later. Like the earth
Definitely.
is screwed. See ya, we're gone. Right. So
Yeah.
I like that callback, and
Hmm.
to create space kind of space travel in an ethical way. And that's so cool that you guys all have rocketry and those shoebox satellites. I didn't
The
know
little
that.
CubeSats, NASA CubeSats. Yeah, it gives universities a chance to develop an actual satellite, program the satellite, and then it goes on a launch, and it actually goes into space, and they can like collect data from the satellite. So CubeSats have become so popular. There's university teams, high school teams, companies do it too.
Oh my, have you done one yet? I'm sure you
I have
have.
not.
Oh,
I've
you
never been
should.
involved in a CubeSat actually. Really want to. And some of the mentees that we've had in the program are building CubeSats, so I've kind of lived through them as they do that. But I'm on a rocketry team in college, and I did some rocketry in high school as well. But I love that it's so widely available that almost every university that you'll look up in the U.S. and internationally has some sort of rocketry initiative where they make model rockets or liquid propellant, solid propellant rockets. So I think that's awesome.
That's really cool. Can I ask you a couple questions about your rocketry? Like, what are you guys working on right now? What does your project look like? Are you really involved in like the data side of it, or is it building it? What does that look like?
For sure. So I can't speak too much to this because I just started. I'm
Okay.
a freshman in college, so I just joined this team like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Mm,
But I go to Georgia Tech and I'm in the Yellow Jacket Space Program, which
awesome.
is aiming to be the first collegiate liquid rocketry team to send a rocket into space, and we're getting there. We might get there before I graduate college. We'll see. We're hoping for another fire test this semester. So if we can see fire this semester, that's good. But I'm on the avionics team, so I work
Mm,
on the software for the flight computer, which is all written in Rust.
okay.
So
Oh, that's a
um,
different language. I don't know Rust. I don't think I've heard that
yeah.
before.
Yeah, a
Okay.
lot of them are written in C. A lot of people have
Hmm.
like full stack C frameworks for flight computers, but we do everything in Rust.
Okay.
So I'm learning Rust right now to help program the flight software for the computer. So hopefully I'll get to see my computer aboard a launch, but I don't know a lot about the time limit of the launches or anything that we're doing in that sense. But if you look up Yellow Jacket Space Program, we have had some launches in the past that I was not a part of because I wasn't in this team yet, but
Yeah.
hopefully fingers crossed before I graduate, we'll get some awesome news.
Oh my goodness, that's so exciting. Like I'm stoked for you, and I feel like it has this like this energy to it. Like that's so beautiful that you have those programs throughout the states and you have people really excited about space and like the next
Definitely.
generation, that push
And I
towards
think
space
that's so
travel.
exciting that this has happened in like one generation. Because when I think back
Mhm,
to my parents, they went to college in
mhm,
Poland. That was not a thing that they could dream of, where they were in a liquid rocketry team trying to launch a rocket 100 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers. Very high into space. That wasn't even like a possibility that they could dream of. So the fact that I'm only one generation removed from them
mhm.
and I'm already in a team that's trying to do amazing things like that, I think is awesome.
Yeah. The structured nature of it too, the fact that it's so readily available, but there's competitions and there's
Definitely.
steps and processes, that's beautiful. I didn't see that growing up. Like we made rockets with my dad just being like, again, his nuclear chemistry coming out to be like garage science, but like
Yeah.
it was
It was
never
not a
organized.
structured thing. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
And the fact that now there's cyber competitions, there's First Robotics, which is like the really well known robotics competition. There's so many things, like I could never even do all of them if I wanted to. And the fact that I have so many opportunities like that, I think it's awesome. And it shows that progress is possible and change is possible. And we just got to believe.
The push towards that. And you know what I love about this conversation is I love the normalization of science and the normalization of like being nerdy and being really interested in something really niche.
Exactly.
Like I think that's beautiful, but what I also think is so beautiful is the rise of like social media in science and influencers within science and people like
Mm-hmm.
yourself who've like created a organization and now they're an advocate for science. Like that's so wonderful that you're getting your flowers and you're getting kind of like social standing and following
Thank you.
because it's so important. We need to like normalize and make scientists rock stars again because I feel like it's better for everybody if we do.
Definitely, definitely. And I love that now whenever we have like a fashion week, like I've seen at New York Fashion Week, they allow like space influencers and
Cool.
like NASA astronaut candidates to walk in the shows. And I love that intersection of things like fashion and makeup and science because I think
Mhm.
it's so important in bridging the gap to be like women who pursue these fields don't have to have traditionally masculine interests. Like they can still be interested in traditionally stereotypically feminine things and succeed in the field. You don't have to change your personality or your interests or things that you like just to have a chance in the career. And I love that widespread things that kind of put people on a podium, like a fashion week or
Mhm.
like a runway, are including women who pursue STEM degrees and STEM fields and STEM careers. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's really cool that like women in STEM and women in trades now are being shown as their true selves, as their authentic full selves.
Exactly.
Yeah, other than just like one kind of avenue of it.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I wanted to talk about is well, first off, I wanted to say congratulations that you are the recipient of Facebook's Gen Z's Change Makers, which
Thank
is
you.
just it's a huge honor. Like it's crazy. And I wanted to ask you maybe if you could give advice to fellow Gen Zers who are entering a career in aerospace, and then maybe advice to an older generation. What do you think needs to change about culture to bring in a younger generation? Because, like you said maybe 20 minutes ago, that you guys are going to be the next future CEOs and the next people that are going to change policy and inform policy. So, maybe advice to fellow Gen Zs and then advice to people within the community already. What do you think is maybe a blind side for them or a blind spot for them?
Definitely. So my number one thing for Gen Z always is to just do it, to go for it, to brush off any negative feedback that you get. I feel like my generation, especially because of COVID, I think we've gotten very good at just like cold emailing and
Hmm.
asking and sending that message and just taking a chance. And I'd say that that is what brings us success in any field, especially going into something like aerospace. So I would say for Gen Z, keep being bold, keep being like
Mm,
unapologetic, and just keep pushing forward with that and know that you belong in this conversation. You have a seat at this table, and like we are the ones who are going to make the difference. So to Gen Z, my message is just all encouragement.
yeah.
And to older generations, I would say that it's like thanks to their support that we're able to push this movement forward. So, like older mentors, people
Hmm.
who support the organization, who see the need for change. But again, I always circle back to that idea of the older generation needs to see that this is possible and they need to reflect back on how it was when they were growing up. They need to see how much progress there has been so far and
Hmm.
see how much longer we have to go and just recognize like we can do this. We don't have to accept that there's always going to be that discrimination and we can make a change. And that just comes from like a mindset flip in everyone, including the older generation, to say like no, I'm not going to accept the fact
Yeah.
that there is discrimination in STEM. Like that needs to change.
Yeah, we're gonna keep going, and also I like that caveat of saying thank you too, to be like we are allowed to be so bold as a generation because there's so many people that came before us and they paved the way and they started it and we're ready to kind of take the reins and keep going. And I love that encouragement. I think that's fantastic. Yes, keep going and keep being bold and keep doing something new and different and rebellious. I love it, Carolina. For the last one, I wanted to end just on the future of girls in aerospace. I just wanted to know what are you I know there's some things you can't talk about that are happening in 6 months, but if you can't talk about something, what are you guys currently working on? What to expect this year from you guys as fans of the page and fans of the organization? And any other projects that you're currently really excited about and working towards?
Definitely. So I'd say that the number one thing that we are working on is to continue the mentorship program. And that's one of the things that I can't talk about later
Hmm.
is like a little mentorship program spin-off. So get excited for that. It's pretty much mentorship program on steroids,
Love it.
completely reimagined and vamped up. So that's going to be later next calendar year. But apart from that, our general mission now is to leave the COVID times of having to do everything online and start to have in person meetings, in person conferences, in person gatherings, because there is a connection that you get from seeing someone in person and actually being like in an in person community where you can feel like the atmosphere
Hmm.
of encouragement and hopefulness and support that you just can't get when you're in a Zoom call with a mentor. So, our general goal over the next year is everything in person, everything personal, and focus on connection. But we still do have to lead things virtually because if you want to be international, that's kind of the price you pay as an organization. So we're kind of entering this hybrid mode where we're really putting a focus on in person conferences and events while still leading very, very widespread global virtual programs.
Mm. Oh, I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see this mentorship on steroids. I can't wait to
Thank
see
you.
events in person. And like, I couldn't agree more. It's so nice to have a one on one and to be able to actually talk to somebody and see someone in real life. So I can't wait to see this hybrid model. I think it's going to be so exciting.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Honestly, you deserve your flowers. You've done something incredible, and I know it's just the start. So I can't wait to see the next generation of it and the fourth year of mentorship. And just thank you so much for taking time out of your day today and to speak with
Of course.
us.
Thank you
And
for having me.
you're
Yeah,
welcome.
and I'm so excited to join this community of like women who have come on the show and spoken about their experiences. I think that having groups like that and
Mm.
having an accessible like podcast like that, I mean, you know the number of young girls who are going to come across this and listen to this
Aw.
and say, "Oh, now I feel like I can be an aerospace engineer or a geologist or an industrial engineer or all these different women who featured on the show." So I think that this is absolutely awesome and I'm really honored to be a part of it.
Ah, thank you so much. Honestly, the honor is ours. Thank you for coming onto the show and thank you for doing what you're doing and just being the STEM advocate for all time now, from 15 to now. And again, I can't wait to see.
And hopefully for a long time in the future.
Oh, 100%. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And I just can't wait to see where girls in aerospace go. And I can't wait to be a part of it, hopefully in the future, and to be a part of it now. And just thank you again for coming onto the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was lovely having you. Well, guys, thank you for listening. This is the Smoko podcast. Ta ta for now. We will see you later. Bye.